Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So if you haven't yet, you know the drill. Pause this video and go hit that subscribe button, and also drop a like on this video and turn on your post notifications so you know every time I post. You can also go to my Instagram pages at young_genius.official or hit me up on my personal at _CAM_EO. My name is Capillaries, by the way. So what I'll be doing today is basically going over the topic. We did the circulatory system in a free session I did a couple Fridays ago. I was supposed to upload that video, but there's some stuff wrong with it, and I don't want to get into that because things happen, you know. So I just decided to do over the entire video instead of, posting a crappy video. So let me just get into it, I guess, because another thing for the students at the CSEC level, I should have said that this is intended for students at the CSEC level. So basically I'll be going through the circulatory system according to the CSEC syllabus and not the CAPE syllabus, right? So basically what you guys are supposed to know is basically structure of the heart, the basic physiology of the heart, some major blood vessels, some minor ones too, and basically components of the blood. So let's get to it. It's nothing really hard, to be honest. So basically the structure of the heart, right? So the heart has 4 chambers, and we know this. It has a left side and a right side, and the left side is divided or separated from the right side by this thing here, and it's what we call the intraventricular septum. But at your level you can just say the septum and you get your marks, right? I need to find a pen size that is like suitable. I don't know why I didn't do this before I started recording, but I think that would work. Yeah, 5 here. So it's called the septum, all right? And basically we have veins and arteries that we'll cover, and you'll also find out what is a atrium, plural atria, and you'll find out what a ventricle is as well, as plural ventricles with an S. Yes. So firstly, blood enters the heart through what we call the vena cava, and the mammalian heart has what we call a superior vena cava, and superior here when talking about or when referencing anatomical position. Anatomical position is when you're standing, face facing forward, palms facing forwards, and your toes pointing in front of you. Now, when we're referencing anatomical position, superior refers to the top part of the body, while inferior refers to the lower part. All right, inferior. All right, so the heart has a vena cava that takes deoxygenated blood, and that's blood without oxygen, into the heart. So blood from the top part of the body is brought into the heart through the superior vena cava, while blood from the lower part of the body is brought via the inferior vena cava. All right, and when blood enters the body through the vena cava, we have it entering the first atrium, and that's the first chamber that the blood encounters when it gets into the heart. So right here we have the right atrium, and the atria, meaning 2 atrium at this point in time, because we're talking about the mammalian heart, the atria are at the top while the ventricles are at the bottom of the heart, if you get what I'm saying. Yes. So when blood enters the heart through the vena cava, it goes to the right atrium. Now, the right atrium will experience something we call atrial systole, And the systole basically refers to contraction. So the heart will contract basically. And when it contracts, so squeeze, it will squeeze the blood from the right atrium into the ventricle through the tricuspid valve. And tricuspid basically is telling you that it has three cusps. Cusps as in C-U-S-P. Cusps. Yeah, that's how it's spelled. So when it is forced through the tricuspid valve, it will go into the right ventricle. And while the heart is experiencing atrial systole, the ventricles will relax to allow blood to flow into it. And that's basically when a part of it is relaxed. That's diastole. How I remembered it was that I thought about, this was a bit of missing information on my part. I thought, like when I was younger in grade 11, yes, I thought that when someone dies, their body relaxes, and that's not the case. When you die, your muscles actually start to contract, and I think it's called rigor mortis. Yeah, I think. You can check that though. Not important though. So anyways, that's how I still never forgot it, even though I got that clarified that when you die, you don't actually relax. But diastole is when, you know, the muscles here relax. So after blood enters the right ventricle, remember it's deoxygenated, so no oxygen present at the moment, the ventricle will contract, and that would be ventricular systole. I hope you guessed that, yes. So when the ventricle contracts, the blood will be forced through this first semilunar valve, and it's called a semilunar valve because it's shaped like a half moon. So a fun fact, lunar refers to the moon and semi means half. So basically semilunar valve because it shapes like a half moon. So when the ventricle contracts, it will force the blood through the first semilunar valve here that we will call the pulmonary valve, right? And pulmonary refers to the lungs. So when it goes through this valve here, the pulmonary valve, it's going to go into the pulmonary artery, and that blood vessel, artery, will bring the blood to the lungs. So here and here. So of course you have a left lung and you have a right lung. You have two lungs. Fun fact. Alright, let me continue. Alright, so when the blood gets to the lungs, it basically goes there to become oxygenated, so get oxygen basically. So once it becomes oxygenated, that is the blood becomes oxygenated, it will re-enter the heart through the pulmonary vein. Now, you can use this to remember it. Artery away, think about it like that. So arteries start with A, and away starts with A as well. So you can think about arteries as the blood vessels that brings blood, blood vessels that bring blood away from the heart, while veins bring blood to the heart. Okay, so the pulmonary vein will bring oxygenated blood back to the heart, but this time the atrium that it will enter is the left atrium. All right, and once it gets to the left atrium, the same thing is going to happen. The atrium will contract and force the blood into the relaxed ventricle below, which is now the left ventricle. And this time, instead of through the tricuspid valve, it's through the bicuspid valve, or, you know, also called the mitral valve or mitral valve, however you want to pronounce it. Potato, potato, tomato, tomato. So once blood gets to the left ventricle, the ventricle will contract and force blood through another semilunar valve, and this is called the aortic valve. And this valve will bring blood into the aorta, which will pump blood to the rest of the body. So from your toe to your head to your fingers, everywhere. So that's basically a run through of the physiology, basic physiology of the heart, you know, how it pumps and stuff like that, and basically the whole path of blood through it. Yep. So one thing I hoped you realized while I was talking, perhaps you realized that, or maybe you didn't. Maybe you realized that this side is the left while this side is the right, but looking on the screen, like this side would be your left and this side would be your right. All right. Now, whenever we are looking at the heart here, we are thinking of the heart as being in our bodies. You can think about it like that. Or you can think about it as we looking at a person. Let me erase this real quick to do a real crappy drawing of a person. So here's the head, neck. I have the urge to put arms there, but let's just do that. We don't need arms. Let me take off the arms. You just need a chest. All right, let's say this nice circle here is the heart. No, we are imagining, all right, need eyes to show that this is the front of the face. So we're imagining the heart being shown belonging to this person. So the left side would be this person's left, and the right side would be this person's right. And in this case, the right of this person would be here, and the left would be here. Judging by the fact that our left would be, like, if you're, I'm thinking now that you're looking at me, my left is your right, and my right is your left. Yes, I said that correctly. So you're going to do the same thing and imagine that this person's left is your right and their right is your left. And that's how you'd remember that it's like the left side is over here and the right side is over here. Or I can just remember that it's like weird opposites, you know? But yeah, or you can think about it as being belonging to you. And then the heart wouldn't be turned this way in your body, but it would be mirrored. So the left side would be left, right. All right. So however you want to think about it. So, you know, however you understand it best. So let's move on. So again, these are a bit problematic for some students, remembering the pulmonary artery, the aorta, the bicuspid, and the mitral valve versus the tricuspid valve, and the aortic valve, and the pulmonary valve. Now, as I said, let's walk through this a bit in steps. So the pulmonary artery, as I said, artery away and veins towards the heart. So the pulmonary artery is the only artery in the body that brings deoxygenated blood, right? Don't run out of space. Yeah. So it's the only artery in the body that brings deoxygenated blood. Well, if you're not a pregnant woman. If you are a pregnant woman, the pulmonary artery is not the only artery that brings deoxygenated blood in your body. If you're a pregnant woman, I say pregnant woman like you can be a pregnant man. I don't get myself. If you are pregnant, which you probably shouldn't be at this age, let me stop saying if you're pregnant. If a woman is pregnant, she also has an umbilical artery that brings deoxygenated blood as well, and and an umbilical vein that brings oxygenated blood. So that only applies if you are female and pregnant. All right. Yes. So that's it right there. So that's, again, the pulmonary artery would be here. Let me not write it out. I'll just write an arrow, draw an arrow, because that would be easier and probably more visible for you. All right, pulmonary artery at number 1. And the pulmonary veins would be these orange things right here. So let me just put PV for that. Aorta. The aorta would be the largest artery in the body, and that would go right here. And you'll see where it has many branches, because the aorta will branch into many, I want to say sub-arteries, but different arteries. And you'll learn about some of them, not all of them, because at the CSEC level, you don't need to know all of them. Even at the CAPE level, you don't need to know all of them. They have specific arteries and or specific blood vessels in your syllabus that you're supposed to know. Now, the bicuspid or mitral valve is on the left. So number 3 right here. So it's right here. And the tricuspid, or yes, tricuspid. The tricuspid valve is on the right. As I said, or I didn't say, I should have said, valves are present to prevent the backflow of blood. So to prevent the backflow of blood. I'm sorry, I was writing. I think you can see that, so here am I stating the obvious. Now, the aortic valve is a semilunar valve that prevents backflow of blood into the left ventricle. So once blood gets into the aorta, you know that valve is there to prevent blood from coming back, if you know. Yeah. And lastly, the pulmonary valve, also a semilunar valve, as I said, prevents the backflow of blood back into the right ventricle. So you need to like know those specifics. Like, if you can't remember aortic valve or pulmonary valve, even though it would be impressive if you could remember them, you can just put semilunar valve. It's not 100% required that you know them separately, if you get what I'm saying. Now, the main functions that you need to remember is basically the function of the vena cava, which is to bring deoxygenated blood, that's blood without oxygen, into the heart. Your pulmonary artery brings deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs to become oxygenated. Your valves prevent the backflow of blood. And pulmonary vein. Pulmonary vein is basically the opposite of the pulmonary artery. It brings oxygenated blood back to the heart, and the pulmonary vein is the only vein, if you're not a pregnant woman, that in your body that brings oxygenated blood. Okay, and here we go. The aorta, largest blood vessel, as I said, or the largest artery, and it pumps oxygenated blood from the heart to the rest of the body. And that's it for the heart, but we're still doing the circulatory system, and you're required to know a couple blood vessels. That includes the arteries, the veins, the capillary, and the capillaries. All right, so let's deal with the arteries first, right? Now, arteries have a small lumen, and a lumen is basically, or the lumen is basically the hole that the blood flows through. So let's say you have a pipe or a PVC pipe. I think you know what. Yes, a PVC pipe. The hole in the pipe, you could say that's a lumen. Let's say you have a water bottle. The part of the bottle that the water comes through to enter your mouth, the hole is the lumen. Okay, so basically the lumen of your blood vessel is the hole that the blood flows through. So lumen, hole. The thick layer of muscle that surrounds the lumen helps the artery to basically pump blood, because it's going to be pumped at, or not rupture, I should say, because blood is pumped at a high pressure in in the artery. Okay, if you want to remember this, and you should want to remember it, you can always reference the aorta, because I said the aorta is the largest artery in the body, and basically the aorta pumps blood to the rest of the body. And that's one of the reasons why I should have explained up here why the left side of the heart over here is way fatter or thicker than the right side of the heart. Now, because of the high pressure, the far distance at which blood will have to be pumped to the rest of the body, because remember, the heart is located in the center of the thoracic cavity, so the center of your chest. Some people say it's located under your left breast. That's a myth. Your heart is in the center of your chest. No, I could tell you how you could locate the top of your heart, but I'll save that for another video. But I really want to. But self-control. Alright, so as I was saying, the left side of the heart is thicker because it has to pump blood at it does the final push. You can think about it like that. It does the final push, and that push is going to have to send blood to great distances. So basically to the toes, to the actual crown of your head, other extremities. So you need the high pressure, and you need that thick wall to be able to withstand that high pressure, because you don't want blood to be forced and your heart rupture or something like that. Or even if you think about it, if the left side wasn't thick, it probably wouldn't provide as much force to send the blood where it needs to go. So some of you would have shorter blood like in your head, stuff like that, and that is very problematic. If blood isn't getting to your head, that would actually lead to a stroke or other complications. But let me get back to this. Now, the artery has a small lumen, as I said, and it has thick layers of muscles. It has a thick elastic fiber, and the elastic fibers ensure that the artery bounces back, or the wall of the artery bounces back or regains its form when blood is pumped through it. Remember, blood is pumped at a high pressure, so basically it's going to force the walls out and it has to come back in. It has a smooth inner lining, and that lowers friction. So there's not much friction to resist the flow of blood. And the thick outer wall is for the same purpose, to maintain the heart, not the heart, but the artery wall, so it doesn't rupture when blood is being pumped at high pressure. Now, a vein is basically the opposite. The vein has a wide lumen, and the blood is pumped at low pressure in veins, right? And this makes sense because the wide lumen will actually allow for more space for blood to flow, and it also accommodates the amount of blood, so the pressure wouldn't be necessary, if you get what I'm saying. And for this reason, or not this reason, but thin muscle walls. It has thin muscle walls, thin elastic fibers, and of course a smooth inner lining as well, because smooth inner lining would reduce friction and therefore not resist the flow of blood. And a thin outer wall. Now, the thin walls is basically just there so because the blood isn't being pumped at a high pressure, so there's no risk of rupture. So you can use that to remember the difference between arteries and veins. And another thing, usually on the diagram shown on your past papers, you will see valves in the veins. The veins have valves to prevent the backflow of blood, or I said this already, to prevent the backflow of blood. Because blood is being pumped at such a low pressure in your veins, it's more likely that blood will backflow. So they'll show it in the veins. Also, capillaries. Capillaries are the smallest, basically. And what you have happening is you'd have a major artery. Then the artery will branch into what we call arterioles. Oh, it's right here. Don't have to write it out. Arterioles. And then arterioles will branch into smaller branches, and those would be your capillaries. Now, the capillaries will meet a branch that is like the miniature version of a vein, and those are called venules. And that will lead to the major blood vessel, which is the vein. Okay? So let me go through that again. Let's say artery away from the blood. So oxygenated blood is brought away from the heart through an artery. When the artery when you get to, let's say, a muscle, it will branch into arterioles, and the arterioles will further branch into capillaries. And at the capillaries, gas exchange will occur. So basically, the red blood cells, let's call them RB for now, will basically unload oxygen where it's needed and pick up carbon dioxide and leave. And when it leaves, you will branch or get to branches called venules. And those venules will lead to veins. And the vein is really what brings deoxygenated blood without oxygen, back to the heart. Okay? So that's basically how that works. And I will mention later oxyhemoglobin, hemoglobin, and carboxyhemoglobin. Alright? So basically, oxyhemoglobin is hemoglobin with oxygen. So that's when red blood cells have oxygen and not carbon dioxide. So that would be when they're bringing oxygenated blood to the muscles or organs that need it, while carboxyhemoglobin would be hemoglobin with carbon dioxide rather than oxygen. And that would be when they're in fact leaving the muscle with the waste carbon dioxide that needs to be expelled when you breathe. Okay? So that's that. And the major blood vessels that you need to know. Now you need to, let me just write a few keywords. Hepatic, renal. I will not write anymore because you don't need to know those yet, because we're doing the circulatory system. I would give you a bit more prefixes like cardi for heart and stuff like that, but I don't need to because we're not dealing with that right now. Now, hepatic refers to the liver and renal refers to the kidneys. All right? And now, here we have the heart. And blood is brought from the heart through the largest artery. And what's that? I hope you said aorta. Yes. So from the aorta to different parts of the body. Now, you have the upper body, you have the lower body. And let's talk about the lower body first. So in the lower body, you'll have the hepatic artery bringing deoxygenated blood to the liver. And you have the hepatic vein, which will bring deoxygenated blood from the liver. You also have the hepatic portal vein, and the hepatic portal vein would be the blood vessel that brings, is it oxygenated? Oxygenated blood from the stomach and the gastrointestinal tract to the liver. All right? Now, as I said, renal refers to the kidneys, and the renal artery will bring oxygenated blood to the kidneys, and the renal veins will take deoxygenated blood from the kidneys. Now, you're supposed to know which artery and vein brings blood from the heart to the vein, to the brain, heart to the brain, and from the brain back to the heart. Now, the artery responsible for taking blood from the heart to the brain is called the carotid artery. Alright? And I know you're going to think it's carotid vein, but you don't have carotid veins. You have multiple carotid arteries. However, blood is brought back to the heart from the brain via the jugular vein. Alright? And those are basically the ones that aren't on this diagram right now that you're supposed to know. Now, the circulation, the heart is referred to as a double pump, and that's because it has two phases of circulation. That is, let's move this, and I'm getting sick and tired of this color, so let's change it. The pulmonary circulation and the systemic circulation. Now, pulmonary circulation is the first phase of circulation in the heart, and I think you can guess what it is. So basically, pulmonary circulation is when blood is brought from the heart to the lungs to become oxygenated, and then brought back to the heart via the pulmonary vein. Yes, the pulmonary vein. And that would be one cycle right there for pulmonary circulation. But then the heart will experience systemic circulation, where blood will leave the heart again, and this time blood that has left the heart will go to the different parts of the body that needs it, and then it will be returned back to the heart as deoxygenated blood. And basically, you can think about it as blood leaving the heart to the body systems and back to the heart, and that would be systemic circulation. And that's why the heart is called a double pump, basically because blood leaves the heart twice, leaves and returns to the heart twice in one cardiac cycle. Cardiac cycle is basically blood that, when blood enters the heart via the vena cava, leaves via the aorta and returns back to the heart via the vena cava, and that would count as one actual cardiac cycle. Of course, that would include when the blood leaves to the lungs and back to the heart. So one cardiac cycle includes both systemic circulation and pulmonary circulation. I need to find a way to make these videos way shorter. I hope you're not bored. I'll be very offended. Oh my god. So you're supposed to know a couple components of the blood, and we'll go in the order which I want to, basically, because I thought that I went from I don't know which order I went in. I know I like blood, I like erythrocytes, and then I like white blood cells, just seemed okay to go after, and then thrombocytes, then plasma. It doesn't even matter which something there I went in. Let me change the color. Green seems okay to me. Alright, so red blood cells are called erythrocytes, and the suffix cytes, C-Y-T-E-S, refers to cells. So you could have cytology, C-Y-T-O-L-O-G-Y, which is the study of cells, right? And you could have, maybe you have heard about this, maybe you have not, erythrocytosis, and that's when you have the overaccumulation of red blood cells in your blood. Yes, but I am going to get to one that I know that most of you know for sure. Let's not do erythrocytosis just yet. Now, red blood cells have distinct shapes, right? They are biconcave and they have no nucleus. So basically, red blood cells die within a couple of weeks. And of course, more is generated by the bone marrow, in the bone marrow. So that's where red blood cells are synthesized. Let's say RB, because RB is shorter than red blood cells. RB synthesized I could just say in here because I already wrote bone marrow. So basically RB, red blood cells, are synthesized in the bone marrow. Alright? And they contain hemoglobin, as I was saying the other couple minutes ago, basically. So basically, as I had said, you have oxyhemoglobin, and the carboxyhemoglobin. I would explain to you how this works because, alright, basically you have Fe 2+ ions, that's iron 2+ ions, attached to the protein, because hemoglobin is a protein, and basically oxygen will attach to the Fe 2+ ion and form what we call a complex, and the blood will actually carry it to it, and when it gets to where it needs to be, oxygen detaches and carbon dioxide attaches. That's how it happens. But you don't need to know that process. But you do need to know the difference between a red blood cell and a white blood cell. Now, white blood cells are called leukocytes, and they're different types of leukocytes. And I told you I was going to get to something you should know, or maybe most of you know. Leukocytosis. That's the overaccumulation of white blood cells in the body, and in the blood, sorry. And you probably know it commonly as leukemia, which is the cancer of the blood. Probably you knew it was cancer, but you didn't know what type of cancer. It's cancer of the blood, and it happens when you have too much white blood cells, basically. Now, the white blood cells can vary in shape, and these do have nuclei present. And you can subdivide these into lymphocytes and phagocytes. Now, the difference between lymphocytes and phagocytes is that lymphocytes produce antibodies that will fight against pathogens, alright? While phagocytes will engulf the pathogen. Now, engulf meaning, let's say this is a cell, the white blood cell, or let's say it's the phagocyte. Let's say this dot here is the pathogen. The phagocyte will surround it, and then you'll have one phagocyte with the thingy in it, the pathogen in it. So basically, the phagocyte eats or ingests the pathogens. Is Nyam too vulgar? Nyam it up. But yeah, that's all you need to know for that. Now, platelets, also called thrombocytes, these are responsible for the clotting of your blood. So for forming thrombuses, I don't know if it's thrombosis, but forming a thrombus or blood clot. So I knew I spelled that incorrectly, you know. The M is missing. Let's write that again. Alright, forming a thrombus, also called a blood clot. Alright, now they are the smallest of the three that we just showed. So platelets, white blood cells, and red blood cells, they are small. and they have no nucleus as well. So they're rowing in the same boat or rowing in the same boat as red blood cells. They don't have a nucleus. Now, ions that are like help with the clotting of blood are calcium 2+ ions, Ca2+, which is calcium 2+ ions, and vitamin K helps to clot blood as well, helps in the clotting of blood. So remember those. Now finally we have plasma, and that's the liquid component of the blood. And the plasma has a lot of things. It has proteins, it has hormones, it has water, it has antibodies produced by lymphocytes, of course. You have dissolved oxygen, and dissolved oxygen may include dissolved gases may include carbon dioxide and oxygen, O2. Mineral ions, and there are a myriad, like many mineral ions, but the one that I mentioned earlier was the Ca2+ ion, which helps to clot the blood. Also has lipids, carbohydrates, like glucose. This may sound familiar for some of you. Glucose is a carbohydrate that is found in the blood. Now, when you have high glucose levels, you're said to be hyperglycemic. Okay? And when you have low glucose levels, you're said to be hypoglycemic. Alright? Now, when you are hyperglycemic, the pancreas would produce insulin, but it would be released by the liver, and insulin would basically decrease the blood glucose level. Alright, so that hormone insulin is used to decrease the blood glucose level. However, when you're hypoglycemic, your body, your liver as well, will release glucagon. That's a different hormone, and glucagon will raise the blood glucose level. Alright? So, yeah. And of course, blood cells in the plasma. Red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets. Red blood cells are called erythrocytes. White blood cells, overall called leukocytes, and the platelets called thrombocytes. Hoping you're remembering all of these. Now, let's do a quick run through of how a blood clot occurs. Alright, so basically, whenever you have an injury and you're bleeding, that means that you've ruptured a blood vessel. Okay, and you'd have platelets coming to do their work. So first, your blood vessel will contract or constrict, and that's called vasoconstriction. And that would basically be like a pinch in the area to decrease the amount of blood flow to the damaged area, because you don't want to be losing any more blood than you're actually losing. This will cause platelets to be activated, and they will come together and basically stick together wherever the rupture was, so wherever you're bleeding, to basically plug the hole. So you can think about it as you having a sink, okay? And say you put the stopper thing. I don't know what they're called, but they're stoppers. You put it in the sink hole to stop the water from running out of the sink. So you can think about platelets as the stopper, okay? And basically, platelets will stick together or clump together and use that to form a plug. Them sticking together to form a plug that will actually plug the area or block the blood from flowing through the damaged area anymore. So that's number one, stop the bleeding. Now, platelets and the damaged tissue will release things called clotting factors, and you don't need to know all of them, but you should know, I think, these. Prothrombin, thrombin, what's the third? Probably should have written these down. It's coming. Fibrino. I'm so tired of this. Brinogen. I need to learn to spell. And then fibrin. So basically, prothrombin, pro meaning before, will convert to thrombin, and then thrombin will convert to fibrinogen and then to fibrin. Now, the blood clotting mechanism, that's basically the blood clotting mechanism to form fibrin, and fibrin will be the mesh that will actually finally stop the bleeding. Once this occurs, once fibrin basically forms that mesh, stop the bleeding, it will harden, and the new skin will start to form underneath it. So basically, here we go. And let's say this is the clumped together fibrin and platelets. Yes, new skin will start to form under here. Let me use a color that we can actually see. Genius. There. Okay. Once the new skin is totally repaired underneath, this coagulation of platelets and fibrin will actually fall off, and that's what we call a scab. That's the scab, the thing that comes at the top of your cuts. Yeah, that falls off and exposes your brand new skin. Say it like you shed your skin like a, is it a cat? No, cats shed fur like a snake. So that's basically what happens. Oh yeah, I had included practice questions. So let's just run through these real quick, like to test whether you got the stuff or not. Alright, so first let's label these. So A would be the vena cava. B here would be the aorta, fat blood vessel here. C would be the left ventricle, even though it's not dissected. Now it says, explain how the function of the heart may be affected by a blockage of the blood vessel labeled X. Now the blood vessel labeled X is the coronary artery, and this takes blood to the heart muscles. It kind of sounds funny to say away from the heart to the heart muscles, but that's basically what it is, what it does basically. So if this artery here is blocked, or this blood vessel is blocked, how would the function of the heart be affected? First of all, that means oxygenated blood, O2 blood, let's say that, will not get to the heart muscles. And remember, muscles in action or working muscles undergo respiration. So, of course, there will be a buildup of CO2 over time that needs to be taken away. So if it's not getting oxygenated blood back to the heart muscle, basically, there is a buildup of CO2, and of course, during respiration, you have a buildup of lactic acid in muscles as well, and there is what we call an O2 debt. And if this O2 debt is not being replenished or fulfilled by oxygen, then eventually you'll have the tissue or the muscle dying. We don't need that, because if the heart muscle dies or the heart tissues start dying, your heart will eventually stop. And if your heart stops, That sound like problem. Not gonna lie. Not gonna lie. That sound like problem. So basically, that's what will happen. Now here we go. I think it's the final question. Yes. Now it says which blood vessel, A or B, represents a vein. Told you that you can use the valve to distinguish between this. So this would be blood vessel B. Yes, that's B. Now, diets high in saturated fats may lead to the formation of plaques in blood vessels. Explain how such deposits may lead to hypertension. Hypertension is a fancy word for high blood pressure. High blood pressure, okay? So basically, shouldn't have written behind there. Basically, densities high in saturated fats will contribute to you getting low density lipoproteins, which is LDL. Low density lipoproteins. Extra word, fancy word for cholesterol. Alright? And what will happen is plaque will start to build up on the walls of the blood vessels. And this is basically making the space for blood to flow way smaller. And when it's making it way smaller, blood is going to be pumped at a higher pressure. Like, I don't know how many of you do physics, but pressure is equal to force over an area. And let me show you a bit of math to prove this. Basically, pressure is directly proportional to the force and inversely proportional to the area at which the force is being applied. So basically, if you increase the force, pressure will increase. And if you decrease the area,